We're back. For our last segment, we're going to be speaking with a longtime activist in the community, and it's really an honor to have her with us today, Glory Kalanko, who is Executive Director of Women Watch Africa and has worked for a number of years with women refugees in particular. In Clarkston especially, we want to talk about because of the issues that have been happening there recently with ICE. So welcome, Glory. Thank you for coming.
And I just want to say to everyone, Glory is also a former board member of WRFG and so a longtime supporter of this station. So we're doubly happy you're here today, Glory.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Glory, could you start by explaining the history of Women Watch Africa and your involvement and what the organization does?
Thank you again. Women Watch Africa was set up in Dakar, Senegal in 1994 and was established in Atlanta, Georgia in 1997 to provide services to the unmet needs of African refugees and immigrants here in the state of Georgia, and we provide comprehensive social adjustment services to refugees and immigrants that stem from health and wellness, doing work in the area of preventing community violence, civic engagement, and the most important thing is understanding the laws in the United States as foreign born, since this is now our new home country. And currently, Women Watch Africa provides services to people from African nations from 23 countries, and Somali happens to be one of those countries that we serve.
And could you say a little about your own story
Oh my goodness.
and where you're from?
I'm originally from Nigeria and have been a human rights activist for 42 years now, doing both local, national, and international human rights work, and have had the privilege to represent at 15 United Nations conferences and made presentation at 8 of those, and was also a consultant to UNIFEM, United Nations Fund for Development Fund for Women, working in the area of female genital mutilation around 5 West African countries, trying to work with men and traditional birth attendants to highlight the danger and health implication of female genital cutting, and see how we can work together to addressing that, because female genital cutting leaves a long-lasting health impact on the lives of women and girls who have gone through the practice. And so, having been in Atlanta, Georgia, we have been doing work around health and wellness and also addressing the issue of female genital mutilation. We're looking forward to also having a major conference this summer where we're going to be having young people come together for the first time to talk about the issue of female genital cutting. And this is as a result of the fact that a medical doctor was recently arrested in Michigan for performing FGM in the workplace.
Well, since we're speaking about the problems and the evils of patriarchy, is domestic violence another issue that you work on?
Violence against women is a major aspect, and Women Watch Africa was actually fashioned out as a social justice organization for the elimination of all forms of violence against women and the girl child. And so domestic violence happened to be one of those. And we also work around the issue of forced and early child marriage. We work around the issue of denial of education to the girl child, and denial of employment opportunity, and also in the area of health disparities as it affects the girl child, especially in some of the East African countries where we have high rates of infant mortality, whereby the preservation of nutritional meals are kept for the infant male child to make sure that the boy child survives, because they believe that the boy child is the one that retains the family name, and so is the one that retains the family tree. So the girl child is supposed to be nurtured ripe enough for marriage, and then that case transferred to the husband, so they do not want to invest much in the education of the girl child, or also in terms of anything that has to do with her well-being. So even in cases where the girl child is very bright and she's allowed to go to school, is seen as a favor. And so when the economic situation becomes very tough in the family, she's the first to be withdrawn from school and sent into domestic servitude to raise money to train the boy child. And in the process of that, sometimes she's exposed to all kinds of abuse, including being beaten as a maid, and sometimes also, worst case, sexual assault takes place, and in some cases she's even sold into trafficking.
So what were the effects of colonization in terms of gender on women and girls, in addition to everything else that you're saying?
I first and foremost like to say that when we talk about colonization, especially in Nigeria where I come from, women played a major role to achieving the independence of Nigeria from the hands of colonial masters. And after women fought, for those who know the history of Nigeria, the 1948 Aba Women's Riot was when the women took to the street and fought and chased out the colonial masters from the country, when they were forcefully trying to ask women who were petty roadside traders trying to make a survival that they had to pay taxes. And so the women fought and chased them away. That led to the rise of movements that women came together to talk about the need to take control of their country. And then the men felt threatened and joined in the movement, which led to the talks about independence of Nigeria. But not long after the independence was fought and came, the men chased the women back to the background and made sure that women didn't have voices. And sometimes the women had cause to say that nothing has changed, that all that changed was the difference in the color of the people who are now governing, and that they fought for independence, and that when the men took over, it's only the black faces that took over from what the government looked like, and that the men who now got into leadership still did the exact same things that they complained that they didn't like, by staying in their homes and pressing the bell to call in their servants from the boys' quarters and asking them, to come to provide service. But women had always fought because Nigeria had been a patriarchy kind of system, whereby everything that is in place has been placed in the interest of the men, because they are the ones who formulated the laws. And most of these laws have been fashioned under customary laws. And so lots of women attorneys have been fighting for many years, fighting to be able to change the system. It's been very difficult, because up until this time, we have not had a female to preside over the customary court. And it is in those courts that you can change lots of all of these things that are affecting women. Evidence have shown that whenever we have a woman in leadership position, there are lots of changes. A woman who was made the Minister for Education in the northern part of Nigeria at some point in time was the one who made it mandatory for the girl child to go to school and be in school until high school. And she made it free for the girl child to go to school. And she passed a law that it was punishable to withdraw the girl child from school to be given out for marriage. And this was a means of addressing the issue of forced and early child marriage.
Maybe we could move to, one of the reasons we wanted to have you and Lovett, who was going to come on from Black Alliance for Just Immigration. Unfortunately, she had an issue with her child, so couldn't come today. It is what is happening with the Somali community in Clarkston in particular. And I wanted to ask you about that, but also to talk about what is going on in Somalia now. that this government wants to send these several hundred Somalis who've been living in the United States for years back into. So if you wouldn't mind maybe giving a little background that you have about what's going on in Somalia now, and then talk about what happened in Clarkston.
First and foremost, it's important for people to know that Somali is the only African nation that has been in war for over 30 years. And it took a long time because people were saying Somali is no longer a country. There is no country like Somali because of the many years of war that the country had experienced. And refugees in United States, Somalis were the very first set of refugees in United States that came in en masse as a result of the war that is going on in Somalia, outside of the situation of the First and Second World War, in terms of looking at ethnic wars that led to people being displaced both internally and externally. And if people understand the composition of Somali, is one of the most populous community in terms of clans. Somali is broken up into many clans, and it has created a lot of political differences among the clans, and also the political leadership that the country had experienced. So putting all of those together had been a situation whereby even when they had made arrangements to sort of like have conversation to put an end to the war, one group would feel they are not represented. And once that feelings comes up, then there's another spark of disunity, and then it's crisis. We are lucky to say that Somali finally experienced a transition with having an election that was non-violent, and now we have in place a democratically elected government. Even at that, there's still some ramblings that is going on in Somali. But when I try to explain the situation in Somali, I try to bring a little bit of comparison with the issue of Katrina, and to let people understand that when Katrina struck here in the United States, it happened to people who have lived their lives all in the United States, and they were displaced from what happened to them, and some had to move. I had to pay host to 2 people to live in my house when Katrina struck. But what I'm trying to say now is that ever after Katrina struck, it took many, many years for those individuals to rebuild their lives. Now we're talking about Somali, and a country that has been in war for many, many years, where people were displaced first into being refugees. Some haven't experienced their loved ones being killed in front of them and running away with just the shirt on their back, and spending many years in refugee camps before they were lifted into the United States as refugees. Some managed to run and came here as asylees and got here to apply for asylum. We're still having problems with some of those who applied for asylum, whose asylum applications were denied, and so they are still trying to fight it. Under any just situation, you would imagine, who would claim not to understand that there's war going on in Somalia and somebody's running here and asking for asylum and the application is being denied? How much more, what evidence do you need to prove that the country is in crisis and that the person is running for safety? Somali was one of the countries that was granted the temporary status visa, and some of the people who came from Somali do not understand English. They cannot read and write. They do not understand that after a certain period of time, it was mandatory for them to go back and renew the temporary status that was granted them. And so, having lived with it and it expired, they have been unable to renew the temporary status, and they are told that they've gone out of status. So that's also one of the situation that is going on. But also the general belief and appeal that people have been talking about is that it took many, many years for the war to go on in Somali. Changes cannot come overnight. it has to be a gradual process. The person who has been elected as president is understudying what it will take to bring peace among the people of Somali. You have to bring peace, you have to unite the people from the different clans to bring them together in one accord for them to be able to work together as one. There are some people who are wounded, who are still feeling that the person who created this problem came from this clan, is X, Y, and Z, and I have suffered this. So those things have to be put in place before we can see Somali to be a just society that we can ask people to go. The majority of people who have been in this country, like I said, the war has lasted more than 30 years. Some of them know no place in Somali. They came here very young. They have spent over 20 years in this country. This is where they know as home.
And so the news has reported that 5,000 Somalis have been targeted nationally. And what happened in Clarkston?
Yeah, it's true. 5,000 Somalis have been picked up and are awaiting deportation nationally. But 2 weeks ago, Clarkston experienced its own spate of arrests and raids and arrests from ICE officials. And as a result, 8 Somalis were picked up, 7 men and a woman. And they are all at the Irving Detention Center. And 2 of them that I know very well have been in this country for over 20 years with no criminal record. So it breaks my heart when people with no criminal record are being picked up just because they have overstayed their visa here. And one of those individuals had even applied for an adjustment of status because he got married to an American citizen and his children are all American citizens, and yet he is picked up. In fact, he was picked up at his place of work. He works in a car dealership. He was picked up with the uniform in which he went to work.
So can you talk about the community's response to this and the meeting on Saturday where people learned about their rights and what the plans are for this week?
The Clarkston community is very shaken. People became very frightened. People became very afraid to even come out or walk on the streets. As an immigrant myself, we have had experience of repression from people in uniform. So sometimes we are nervous when we see people in uniform. So with what now happened in the community with the ICE raids, it became difficult for people to even go out to purchase food. So we have been talking to the people to say it's safe, you can go out, you can walk, and we'll try to see how we can all come together and be each other's keeper. Let's make sure we are being at alert, we're watching out for each other. And that led us to having a Know Your Rights training last Saturday, which is the second of its series. We're trying to make sure that people understand what their rights are. And if anybody knocks on their door and their rights not to open their doors, or if they are stopped and they are being questioned, that they have the right not to speak, other than just saying what their names are and not to say anything beyond that. They have the right not to answer any questions because that's the only way they can avoid answering any complicated questions that might lead to something else, because the more you begin to answer one question is from one and it leads to the other. So and we also make sure that community members understand that they have the right to legal representation. And so when they are accosted by people within the law enforcement, they should just say, I don't want to speak, I don't want to say anything, I need a lawyer, I need a lawyer. So the moment they keep saying they need a lawyer, that's enough for the officer not to push further in terms of forcefully extracting information from them. Sometimes we also, we made them to understand that sometimes they might come to knock on your door under the guise there, they are looking for somebody else. and that it's important not to open the door, because sometimes when you open the door, they end up arresting everybody that they find in the home. So it's better to prevent that and not to allow that to happen. But we will continue to conduct this Know Your Right education, and we have also informed all those who were in the class to make sure that they pass the word to everyone.
I wanted to ask you, with that being said, what kind of help do you need? What kind of help does the community, how can we as citizens help? If it's just going to the grocery store, taking people back and forth to the store, just picking up things for them, what kind of help do you need from us?
I think the meeting on Saturday was a huge relief. Because for the first time people were able to come into the room and to talk openly about what was happening, because everybody just sort of went into hiding and feeling unsafe. And the fact that they were able to come out and talk, and then they are asking help and saying, we don't want our loved ones to be deported, we don't want the people who have lived here all their life to be deported. So we were trying to walk around those concerns that have been raised, and those are the things that we are trying to do to creating a safe space for people in the community. Now, in terms of needs for these families, because some of them, the only breadwinners are the people who have been picked up from the families. So we have also sent people to go to them to find out what their needs are, and to find out how they can get assistance. And for us who are in the non-profit area and working with our coalition members, we have tried to make sure that we are reaching out to both immigration and criminal attorneys that we know, and making sure that all of those who are arrested get representation. This morning I also spoke with somebody who is at the Stewart Detention Center. He's making arrangements to go and visit some of them to make sure that they are not feeling alone. And they are also going to be sending them some greeting cards to sort of rekindle their spirit, to make sure that they have not been forgotten.
So Gloria, we've only got a couple of minutes, and there's two things. Can you tell our listeners about what's happening on Thursday, and can you give information if people want to get in touch with you?
On Thursday, Women Watch Africa and other groups in the community will be having a very important meeting with the elected officials in the city of Clarkston, because Women Watch Africa a month ago had presented a non-detainer policy recommendation to elected officials in Clarkston for them to emulate in order to be able to save and protect people in Clarkston. As a result of what has happened, the city is taking serious consideration and is calling for an emergency public safety session to have the conversation on the recommended non-detainer policy, with a view of signing into the policy and making it a policy that would protect and defend citizens of Clarkston. And so I'm very excited about that, and we're looking forward to that meeting, which will take place at 7 p.m. on Thursday at the City Council office, which is located in 3913 Church Street in Clarkston. And hopefully when the chief signs on to that, we'll be able to move forward to having to tell the people that, look, your elected officials are concerned about your safety, your elected officials have put certain policy in place, and so you should be free to walk around Clarkston. Clarkston is a welcoming space for everybody who lives, work, and play and pray in Clarkston. And for Women Watch Africa, if anybody wants to get in touch with us, our number is 404-759-6419. Again, that number is 404-759-6419. 6419. And you can also check our website to see some of the work that we're doing. It's www.womenwatchafrica, with Africa spelled with a K, as AFRIKA.org.
Thank you, John. So I think we've come to the end of the program today, and I think one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that we had this discussion about Clarkston and with Glory is because of the upcoming May Day. And again, we want to stress that the point of the labor forum is to bring all the issues that are important to working people, regardless of their nationality, regardless of where they live. And this is a very serious situation. And most people, when they think of immigration and who's getting deported, they do not think of people from Africa and the Caribbean and even Asia. It's mostly, they feel the situation of people who speak Spanish and come from the southern part of the continent. And it's very clear that there are many, many Africans, there are many, many people from many countries who are here in the United States who face this possible problem. So we want to say goodbye for today. We'll see you back here on May Day, next Monday. Bye-bye.